Dead men tell no tales, but their ships speak volumes. Welcome to the Cursed Compass, where we explore the darkest maritime mysteries.
172 feet below the surface of Lake Michigan lies the decaying hull of a 205-ton schooner. Local maritime folklore insists the ship never truly stopped sailing. For decades, sailors and coastal residents have reported sightings of a tattered old schooner pushing through December squalls, locked in an eternal voyage. This 1900 photograph shows the actual vessel behind the ghost stories, the Rouse Simmons, tied to a dock and stacked tight with evergreen trees. Under the command of Captain Herman Schuenemann, affectionately known in Chicago as Captain Santa, the ship sank with all hands during a severe winter gale in November 1912. The supernatural framing of the wreck overlooks the concrete variables that put the ship on the bottom of the lake. The actual story is rooted in economics, meteorology, and underwater archaeology. The Rouse Simmons soars as a documented forensic case study of a machine pushed well past its physical operating limits by financial desperation. This 3D blueprint models the ship's original 1868 specifications. Built in Milwaukee, it measured 123.5 feet in length with an 8.4-foot height, designed for coastal stability. For roughly 20 years, it served as a highly productive asset in Charles H. Hackley's massive Michigan lumber fleet, making almost weekly runs between Grand Haven and Chicago. This photograph demonstrates the operational baseline of a well-maintained three-masted schooner at full sail, operating well within its design tolerances on open water. But after its service in Hackley's fleet, the Rouse Simmons was repeatedly sold. It entered a category known as tramp ships, aging vessels passed between owners and forced to operate on increasingly narrow profit margins. As railroad networks and highways expanded across the Midwest, they offered faster, safer shipping routes. Older schooners rapidly lost their reliable, high-paying freight contracts. By the fall of 1912, the Rouse Simmons was a heavily depreciated asset. To survive financially, its operators took on high-risk, off-season cargo runs that modern fleets refused to touch. The Schuenemann brothers had built a profitable niche in the 1890s, harvesting evergreens in Michigan and selling them directly to Chicago residents from the dockside of the Clark Street Bridge. This financial flowchart illustrates how they achieved their margins. By bypassing the standard wholesaler supply chain, they sold trees directly, maximizing their return on a single seasonal shipment. Transitioning this chart to the ship's 1912 ownership structure reveals the catch. Herman Schuenemann only held a 1/8 share, Manus J. Bonner controlled 3/4, and Captain Charles Nelson held the remaining 1/8, heavily diluting Schuenemann's final payout. The margin came with extreme seasonal risk. Herman's older brother, August Schuenemann, had already died in November 1898 when his own two-masted schooner went down in an Illinois storm carrying a similar cargo. 14 years later, Herman faced severe financial pressure. Mounting debts made the 1912 Christmas run a mandatory payout to keep him solvent. Early winter snows in Michigan and Wisconsin had grounded his competitors. This created a rare supply shortage in the Chicago market that Schuenemann wanted to exploit. The decision to sail on November 22nd was a calculated economic risk. Driven by extreme debt and the prospect of a fleeting market monopoly, the operators overrode standard safety protocols. The departure conditions immediately compromised the vessel. The crew loaded 5,500 trees at Thompson Harbor in Michigan, cramming them into the hold and across the upper decks until the ship rode dangerously low in the water. This cross-section of the hull and deck visualizes the resulting physics problem. The dense weight distribution of those 5,500 trees severely shifted the schooner's center of gravity upward. Despite later reports of a cursed month, November 1912 had been meteorologically quiet across the Great Lakes prior to this specific storm system. This model simulates the conditions as the ship hit a 60-mile-per-hour gale. Sub-freezing temperatures caused heavy lake water to rapidly freeze onto the wooden rigging and the thick pine branches stacked on deck. This created a fatal condition known as top weight. The accumulated ice added tons of unmanageable mass to the upper half of the ship, drastically reducing its maneuverability in the heavy swells. The storm battered the ship through the night. While checking deck lashings, 2 sailors were swept overboard by a massive wave that also took a portion of the bundled trees and a small utility boat. The Kewaunee life-saving station recorded the final timeline. Logs show a surfman spotted the Rouse Simmons low in the water at 2:50 p.m. The ship was flying its flag at half-mast. In nautical protocol, this is a direct, unmistakable signal of severe distress. At 3:10 p.m., the station keeper dispatched a powerboat named the Tuscarora to intercept, but the search yielded nothing. The ship succumbed to the mathematical inevitability of extreme topweight, severe gale force winds, and rapid ice accumulation on an overloaded hull. Physical evidence began surfacing almost immediately. Christmas trees washed ashore at Pentwater, Michigan in December 1912, and in 1924, a fishing net dragged up Captain Schuemann's well-preserved oilskin wallet. The wreck itself remained lost until 1971, when Milwaukee scuba diver Gordon Kent Bellrichard located it using sonar while searching for a different sunken steamer. Forensic analysis of the wreck site confirms the ship still had steerage and was actively fighting to reach Bailey's Harbor for shelter when it went down. This wireframe of the sunken wreck highlights the specific damage to the mizzenmast, which was violently snapped off above the deck, its upper section missing entirely. Mapping the rest of the debris on this same model shows the main mast dislodged and lying forward on the port side, while the foremast remains intact and parallel. This specific sequence of structural failures indicates the massive torque the ship experienced. The vessel was torn apart by the conflicting forces of the wind on its iced sails and the heavy, shifting cargo below. The debris field on the lakebed serves as a mechanical autopsy. It replaces supernatural myths with the harsh physical realities of structural failure. The practice of transporting Christmas trees by schooner effectively ceased by 1920. The Rouse Simmons sinking highlighted the extreme danger of the off-season trade. This photograph of a massive Great Lakes train yard illustrates the macroeconomic shift, rendering tramp ships obsolete. Real lines offered consistent, weather-independent freight transport. Even Schuenemann's widow and daughters adapted to this shift, choosing to transport their subsequent tree inventories to Chicago by train, using a docked boat merely as a storefront. The persistent ghost ship sightings over the following decades functioned as a sociological coping mechanism. It allowed a coastal community heavily reliant on the lake to process a sudden, horrific loss. Today, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Mackinac, seen here, makes an annual delivery of Christmas trees to Chicago, offering a tangible memorial to the lost crew. The physical wreck is now cataloged on the National Register of Historic Places and protected within the boundaries of the Wisconsin Shipwreck Coast National Marine Sanctuary. The wreck of the Rouse Simmons remains a permanent archaeological monument to the extreme economic desperation and the high human toll of the Great Lakes tramp ship era.